I've had this dream for a while to upgrade the Monocar to a differential. So I've been collecting parts. I have a differential there and hydraulic brakes, new rear hubs. So I plan here to remove the rear cover and just try to make an assessment before I rip the thing apart. Try to figure out if I can actually pull it off. This is a fairly narrow chassis, so who knows, we'll see. So I'm going to take off the cover here and see what I can find out. So what you see here is a Peerless differential with a vintage Cartco adapter. And then they also make these sprockets. This is a 54 inch tooth, I believe. It's designed to fit the 40 size chain. Now on the Monocar right now I'm using a 35, and it's considerably smaller sprocket. It's a 35 chain with a 60 tooth. So you can see when you go with a bigger chain, it's a much bigger sprocket. So I've been thinking about this, and the way I can make this work is I'll need to remove this bracket in the old brake system, so that'll go away. The new disc, of course, will be right in here where there's ample room, and I'll have the caliper probably up here on the front. Then I can box it in here with the 1x3 tubing. Yeah, that might just work okay. See, the width of the track on the front of the car here from center of the tire to center of tire is 38 inches. And with the old go-kart axle, I'm at 36 inches in the rear. But when you run the Peerless differential with the Cartco hubs, your final width is close to, let's see, 38 or 39 inches. It should be pretty close to what I have right now. I forget. I'll have to measure one of their cars and I'll let you know what that is. Okay, so I've convinced myself that I can swap this differential out. Basically, I got to remove the old setup. I'll take the engine off, and then I'll have to grind and do some cutting to get these old components out of there, and then I can start the process of cutting the frame right here, so this will drop in, and adding some additional supports, which I'll tell you all about pretty much as I get there. Okay, this should be a nice upgrade. A bit of a challenge, but what the heck, right? Okay, let's move on. So my thinking is I have to cut out these two bars here. I have to cut this out. So that'll get rid of that. I'll get the axle out of there. That'll just create an open area where I can work from without affecting the placement of the motor or how it attaches. I wanted to take a minute and say that, you know, if you're building a cycle cart with the one-wheel drive arrangement, it's a perfectly acceptable way to put together the rear axle. I've had a lot of fun with this car, and there's really nothing wrong with it. Works great. As you can see, this is the drive wheel, and this is the free wheel. So just because I'm switching to a differential doesn't mean I don't like this setup. I just wanted to try something out. See if it works. A little bit about this motor. Back when I built the Monocar and I originally installed this GX200, it had a modern look to it, you know, and if you were to look at the Monocar photographs, the engine's in the rear and it's exposed. So I didn't want this modern look, so this is where I came up with the idea of grafting on this Kohler shroud and the tank, and then I kind of fashioned this air cleaner and intake. But the whole idea was to make the motor look more antique looking, more like the original car, the British AV Monocar. So it's worked out pretty good. You know, I took the governor off this engine. I put the Venturi in it, a timing key, the bored out carburetor, and then a header. So it's running 11 horsepower or so, and it propels this car up to close to 50 miles an hour, which is more than enough speed for me. Anyway, I call it a little sleeper motor because it looks like an antique motor on top, and many people think that it is, but underneath it's a modern engine. Well, I'm not going to lie to you, it took me about an hour to get this axle out of there. Man, it was stubborn. But I licked it and got it done. Here's the components. Carco rear hub and the bearing and collars, the axle, the sprocket and the sprocket holder, the disc and the brake caliper. Right. Well, it looks like this thing might just work out. We've got the axle more or less lined up, and there's plenty of room for the disc, but of course it's just too tight down in there for the sprocket. But with the smaller number 35 chain and 62 sprocket, it should work fine. I want to cut these two bars out and get this out of here. Alright, yep, this just might work out alright. I've decided that I'm going to tear this further down. I'm going to basically try to take it down to the chassis. I figure I can get to everything back here, okay, but you know, making room for the pedal and the master cylinder and all that up inside there, I think it'd just be easier if I get the body off of it, and then when it comes time to test drive it, it'll just be a bare chassis. Alright, let's take this thing apart. I'm making pretty good progress here getting this thing stripped down to the bare chassis. Another hour's worth of work or so and I'll have it where I want it to be. Just a few more screws and I'll be able to pull this tub out of the frame here. Okay, it's time to wrestle the wooden tub out of the chassis. Alright, that wasn't too bad. So the name of this video series is Rebuilding the Monocar, so I guess that's what I'm doing. It's nice to have it down to the bare chassis because now I can really detail it properly and just clean everything up, freshen it up. I'll have a nice new cycle cart when it's done. You know, I was thinking about how much this thing weighed when I lifted it up. It was fairly light, and I think it was around 11 pounds. And I think that was before I put the aluminum skin on, so maybe it's 15 pounds for the wood tub. Not bad. This car weighed 258 pounds with a gallon of gas in it. It'll weigh a little bit more with this differential, but it'll certainly drive better. Okay, I'm looking forward to cleaning everything up. I thought I would wash the dirt and grease off of this chassis. So with my Sawzall, I cut out the 2 bars that were right here. That went pretty good. Now this piece, I might take my plasma torch to that. We'll see. That's going to be a little tougher. I also want to strip all the paint off of it. Won't be too tough, I don't think. Well, removing this piece has been a little bit more of a challenge, but I used the Sawzall to cut through the welds, and then cold chisel to break it loose, and there I have it. Alright, well that won't be too tough to clean up. Alright, it's coming along. Okay, so I have the chassis out here on a couple sawhorses, and I'm going to use the sandblaster to knock all the paint off. Shouldn't take very long. Here's the hose running under the fence to the compressor. The hose comes around and then through a little filter, and then this pipe helps trap condensate. And then through the hose and out of the compressor. Okay, I'm pleased with the results. I'm down to bare metal, and I'll take a DA sander to it with 180 grit, clean up all the metal. Plus there's a couple of places I need to grind and to fill in with some weld, and just make for a real nice clean chassis that I can add the new components to for the differential. Okay, moving on. I finished sanding the frame, getting it all ready to go. So it's basically ready for primer, with the exception of where I need to add additional cross braces for the bearing support. So I've been thinking about it, and I have an idea. I did a little sketch. Let me show you what I have in mind. Okay, so here's a sketch of the rear of the chassis. Right here is where I'm going to add supports. So one thing I'm going to do is extend the width of the chassis, getting these bearings a little further outboard. So these little blocks here will house bearings. Then I'm going to add these 2 supports. They'll also have bearings in them, and they'll be closer to the differential. And then this cross brace I'll have to add. I'll have to mock up the engine to make sure that doesn't get in the way. I checked it out earlier. It appears that it'll be alright. We'll see. Okay, let's cut up some parts and pieces. and get things ready to weld. So here are the pieces. They're still a little bit long, but that's okay. I've laid them out. I know where I have to drill the holes. Here's the little extension pieces. I have to weld these on. So everything's ready for that process. Alright, let's go out and weld these. Okay, so I'm happy with the way these little extensions came together. I have to drill the 2.5 inch hole on this side and the 1.5 inch hole on that side. But before I drill these, I'm going to drill, there's 2 of these. There's some layout marks there, they're real faint. Anyway, I've been working on a setup out in the mill, in the metal shop here, for drilling these holes, so let me show you that now. We'll get these punched out. Here I have the 2.5 inch hole saw chucked up and ready to go, all centered up, clamped down, ready to drill. So let's see how this works. Here's kind of a partial mock-up of what I'm doing. I got quite a bit of work in these little pieces. This one here will have the bearing, and this is just loosely sitting in here, but there'll be a bearing there and here, and then on outboard here. There'll be a plate across here. I'll have to cut these out here, here, and here. So remember, the whole idea is I can lift the differential and axle out from the top. So I still have plates, 2-inch wide plate with long bolts, nuts and bolts, you know, plate top and bottom. Same thing here. So another evening or two and I'll have everything made to where I can weld it. This This is long right now, which I'll cut the size once I finish with the mock-up. Okay. I've been continuing on, so here's the latest. I've got these bolted on now. I'm going to ultimately weld this, but I'm bolting it on for now. Got the bearing in here. And the whole idea here is I made these plates. These are the bottom plates. So while this is mocked up, I'm going to drill all the way through everything. I got me some nice long 5/16 bolts to join that together. Now ultimately, I'll cut it out right here. Did the same thing over here. I made this little plate just to add strength. And then these will be, in essence, the same thing, but only 1 inch thick. The bearing will be in here, and this is the top and bottom plate. So I think that'll be stout enough. But I've spent a good week of evenings making these parts, so I'm anxious to get the drilling done and the welding done. One other thing I did is I added these little crush tubes, tacked them in place so I can tighten up the nuts and bolts without crushing the rectangle tube. Okay, keep plugging away. Okay, I have everything bolted together now. These were long. I cut them off, cleaned them up, so now they're just the right length. And this thing is built, I'm telling you. That is stout as hell. Yep. I'm happy with that. So I think I can mock up the axle because to put in these two center ones, I want to have the axle in these bearings. Alright, I think that's what I'm going to do next. I've moved everything out here into the metal shop because I'm going to be welding as soon as I get done with this mock-up. So I'm close to the welder. So I have yet to install these two pieces. Really, that's what this setup is all about. It's to get these right where I want them to be, and also to make sure a cross brace will fit right in here, and it appears that it will. These are a little bit long yet. So I've got the motor pretty much where I want it. The sprocket's lined up pretty good. It spins nice, and it's in the two outer bearings at this point. Okay, so this is shaping up. I'm going to keep working on the setup here until I'm happy, and then I'll weld it in. Since I had the motor on the chassis doing the mock-up, I decided to make these little welded pieces here with a captured nut. That would go like that. And you know, if you own a cycle cart or you're building one of the toughest jobs is tightening the chain. You know, you got to get 2 wrenches, you got to loosen all 4 nuts and bolts, it's just a pain in the butt. So with this arrangement, you just have to reach underneath and loosen the 4 bolts. My welds look like crap, but we'll see. If they break, I'll weld them again. Anyway, that's a nice little upgrade that I've been wanting to do for a long time. Took me half an afternoon though. Alright, on to welding that chassis. I have that ready to go. I'll show you where I'm at. This has been a bigger challenge than I thought it would be, but I'm happy with the way it's all coming together. I have this piece tacked in place. These are just wedged in there, but they're right where I want them to be. Everything spins nicely. Of course, I'm going to replace this with a smaller 60-tooth, the 35 chain sprocket. You can see it's right there. Alright, I'm going to get these welded in. I finished tack welding everything in place. Now I'm going to remove the rear axle, and you can kind of see how it goes together here. Okay, so now you can see there's the whole axle. I decided to leave these loose to be slid on the axle. So that works out pretty good. That was my concept anyway. Now I can finish the welding on this chassis, get this all boxed in and completed. Okay, so I rolled the chassis over and I'm fixing to weld on it here. But I noticed one little thing. Let me show you something here. So this is the chassis plate, and I built this in 2014, circa 2014, around the time of 2014. And at that time I was just learning to weld. So here's an example of my welding from then, and then here's my welding now. So I still have a long way to go, but I'd say that's a definite improvement. It just goes to show you guys, you know, if you don't know how to weld, don't worry about it. Just, you know, dive right in. Okay, let's weld this thing up. I'm glad that I stripped this chassis down bare, because the detail work is coming along nicely. This new substructure is nice and stout. I added these little pieces in here to re-strengthen this engine area, engine mounting area. This is the bottom of the chassis right there. Yeah. So the next thing I need to do is get that small sprocket, see if the one I have will fit on that differential. So let's take that differential apart and see what it's made of. So what I want to know is if that hole pattern is the same on the 60 tooth. That would sure make life easy if it was. So this spacer here is held on by these bolts. They go all the way through, and there's some stop nuts in there holding that together. So if I was to loosen those, this would come apart. Alright, let me get that small sprocket and see if that will work. Well, as luck would have it, these do not line up. This is a specific hole pattern that VKC, they make these sprockets. So that hole pattern is one they created when they made this spacer. So I'm going to have to get with Ron over there. Oh wow, this is a 60 tooth right here. But it's just way too big. Okay. That's kind of a bummer. So here you can see where I've installed the 60 tooth sprocket. This is for the 35 chain. I was able to use my mill. I have a boring attachment, and so I opened up the center hole to the same diameter as this, and then I was able to transfer the pattern. So that's the sprocket that came out of the car. It's got 4 years of use on it. Now I was talking to Jack over at Vintage Car Co, and they're gonna make a couple sprockets for me with this size hole and this pattern, and so I'll have some new sprockets. So those will be coming in a couple weeks. But in the meantime, this is great for the mock-up. I'm gonna put it in the car now with all the bearings fully installed. Let's see how that looks. So here it is with the 60-tooth sprocket inside the chassis. Plenty of room. So I've just loosely fitted in. I don't have any of the nuts on there yet. So I'm going to do that and then install the top and bottom plates, and the installation will be complete. This was definitely a challenge, but worth the effort, I think. We got a nice, compact, stout little setup. You know, this is the heart and soul of this cycle cart, the business end. Mile after mile and hour after hour, this is where the work will be done. So I have the engine bolted in firmly, and it's all lined up with the sprocket. And the length of the shaft on each side is, it's a ½ an inch longer on one side, which is pretty good considering I basically just swapped out the axle. So that's pretty close. I'm happy with that. I almost blew it here, almost got too tight in here, but it's, as long as the axle never moves, I'm okay. And it looks like the caliper will fit in here. Alright, this is going to be a sweet ride. Since everything is bolted down tight, what do you say we fire it up and watch it spin? I don't know why, but that's fun to watch. Okay. Alright, let's call this the end of the second video. I'm up to the 30-minute mark. So I'll be working on this caliper and brake pedal setup, and I'm thinking about putting an aluminum tub in it. So lots of good things coming up, so stay tuned. I appreciate that you watch, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks.